What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and welcome to episode 30 something or other of The Knife Guy. I always forget to look before I start the episode. And it's not that I don't care, I'm just excited to talk about what I want to talk about. If you are new to my channel, or you're new to The Knife Guy, or you just came out of some weird corner of the internet and you have no idea where you are, I am a knife guy, knife user, knife collector, knife enjoyer of many sorts. We are all knife guys and gals in this world, right? Those of us who are doing this willingly. And I'm sure there's at least one person watching this going, "What is this?" That's why I make the joke, because I know this is the internet, right? So people come in, they're like, what, where am I? There's like knife people. Somebody said that to me the other day on one of my uploads is like going crazy. That one, it's like knives you shouldn't hand to non-knife people. It has like 80,000 views. So I always have, and I'm not trying to brag. It's funny because like people get dumped into YouTube recommends that video to people who like have no interest in the knife world. So there's people like, what is this? You know? So I find it funny. I can only imagine how that would seem to people coming in, but I can joke with you guys because the vast majority of the people who watch this series are the same people returning. Every week, this series gets almost exactly 1,000 views, so I know it's always the same people, and I appreciate that. That's why I do the series. Anyways, if you're new, I do this once a week. I do knife reviews, knife overviews. This idea here is we all have our own unique paths that we go down as knife guys and gals, but we experience a lot of the same stuff, right? And that's what this series is about, is those shared experiences. I always try to talk about things that are, experiences that the majority of us share. It's not always the case. Today's topic is something that I'm going to guess that the vast majority of you will not want to admit. And you don't have to, but I'm going to, because I do my best to be open and honest on this channel. That's why I don't edit my videos. I mean, yeah, I can, just scrap the video if I don't like it, but that's why there's no takes, right? I start talking. Whatever comes to mind, comes to mind. But this was a premeditated topic, as all the topics of this series are in the channel, even if it's just by an hour. But anyways, the idea here is I just pick knives up that I have talked about already on the channel or am about to. Some of them are mine. Some of them are lent to me by generous viewers. We have a lot. Look how much epicness is on the table right now. I did not lock the exposure. There we go. Sorry about that. Yeah, I like to pick them up and flip them and give people something to watch and or listen to while they're doing whatever it is that they're doing. So that's what I'm going to do here if you're new. And I know that there are a lot of new people because of that, probably because of that upload. So I want to talk about something that I told myself, I'm like, no, I'm never going to talk about that. I don't want to admit that. It's going to make people mad. I'm going to talk about it. Today, by the way, guys, I'm trying to launch a merch store, so it may or may not be up. If you guys want to get your hands on like Metal Complex logo like stuff, phone cases, shirts, water bottles, whatever, I set up this store, and it either has or has not gone live yet because I record all this stuff, way in advance. So if that merch store is available, it'll be the Redbubble link down in the description at the very top of the description, so you can check that stuff out along with all my other links for all my usual stuff, blah blah blah. So understand that what I'm about to talk about is coming from a time way before right now, years and years and years and years ago. This was like right around the time that I first discovered the high-end knife world. So I saw my first Benchmade. I'll never forget this. My first Benchmade I saw on BladePlay.com, and I was like, what? And then the first time I was like, how could they possibly cost that much money? Then I remember going into a local gold and silver shop, and the guy just happened to be the guy who ran the place happened to be a big fan of Benchmade, right? And he actually was a Benchmade dealer and had brand new Benchmades, but he would trade, right? He actually would trade, and I remember he was like, I was like, do you trade knives? And he was like, yeah. I do, and I said, do you trade knives? Like, if I have a whole bunch of knives, can I trade them in for a brand new one? And he's like, yeah, but it depends on what they are. And that's how I figured out nobody wanted my junk knives. Like, the stuff that I had was junk, and he was like, no. He was like, this is a U.S. Benchmade. And so, anyways, at first I was like, well, I don't need that. And then curiosity got the best of me, and you guys know the drill, right? You get your hands on your first high-end knife, and you convince yourself it's the best thing in the world, and then you discover there's better stuff out there, and so you keep lusting after crazier and crazier stuff, and whatever. It's a slippery slope. Not everybody goes down the same slope, but in some way, shape, or form, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Here's something that not everybody experiences. I'll admit, and I know a whole bunch of you are going to comment and go, I have never done that. Nope, no way. And some of you are going to tell the truth, and some of you are going to be lying about it, and I don't really care to find out who's who. I'm just going to admit this, and then you can follow suit, whatever you want. No judgment's going to be passed either way. When I discovered these three, the Holy Trinity, right, this is what Blade Forums and many people on Blade Forums are referring to as the absolute pinnacle of production, U.S. production manufacturing in knives. Chris Reeves Sebenza, Strider SNG, even though this is an SMF, and the Hinder XM18. Boy, did I want that XM18. Here, I pointed over there, but I meant here. I wanted that, right? And so I lusted after it, and the secondary market was just kicking those prices so up high. Everybody's heard this, right? I have a whole channel dedicated to Hinder knives where I talk about this stuff all the time. I can't afford that. I can't even find one. And I don't even know that it's actually going to be unused and I'm going to have to pay an insane amount of money. Well, fortunately, Rick Hinder had collaborated with ZT to bring the ZT 0562 and a number of other designs to the table under the ZT name. The 0562, everybody was saying, was essentially the same thing, except it was on bearing, steel lock bar insert, and the carbon fiber version was arguably using better steel. And I was like, great, I can have the exact same thing, according to Blade Forums, for at the time, $240. You guys have heard this story. A lot of you have. You're like, shut up, get to the point. So I buy it, and I've got it. Now imagine me in 2013, 2014, and I've got this ZT0562, and I love it. It's great, but slowly, I remind myself, this is not a real XM18. Some people got that knife, and they go, yep, this is exactly what I wanted. I don't need an XM18, and then they just move on. But for me and many other people, it just wasn't quite good enough. Fast forward to today, to prove it, I've owned 3 different 0562s myself and 25 different Hinders, at least 16 or 17 more XM18s. Huge problem, right? Now, before I bought my first XM18, I just wanted to feel the actual lines of an XM18. Because anybody who's put an XM18 and an 0562 up against each other, there are similarities, but you look at the XM18, you're like, but the titanium's a little thicker and the blade's a little thicker, and what does the G10 feel like? And look, the screws look so nice, and the blade's not quite as tall, and maybe, I don't know, I just want to feel it. I want to know if the feeling, right, because it's a big part of it, not necessarily how usable it is, the feeling is very important. So, that in your endless conquest, to keep the urge to spend all of the money in your bank account at bay, right? You're constantly looking at pictures online, which is actually making it worse. And eventually, a lot of us, we stumble upon this. We find out that there are clones. There are clones being made of some of our favorite knives, and oh my gosh, they look exactly the same, but look how much less they cost. I stumbled across a, oh God, I can't believe I'm admitting this. No, you know what? I'm not going to say the brand of it because I don't want to condone this, right? Spoiler alert, this video is going to end with me telling you don't buy clones. But I am going to talk about my experience with this. I found a clone of an XM18 for $65 that was running on bearings, had the steel lock bar insert, had all the stuff that I wanted, right? Now Hinder XM18s have all that. Lock bar insert, bearings, and blah, blah, blah. It was D2 and G10, and I thought, man, for $65, I don't really care what steel it is. It looks to be the exact same dimensions and weight as an XM18. You know how I always do things in millimeters and grams? Now, if you're not in the US, you're like, well, yeah, that's how the rest of the world measures things. But for me in the US, I had to convert millimeters, grams to ounces, millimeters to inches, right? A lot of you have been through this. And you find out, ooh, it's almost exactly the same, right? It's not, I came to find out. But I was so excited, I was like, I'll pay $65 to find out if the lines are something that I lust after. And maybe I'll be just happy enough with the clone. So guys, I bought, this was a long time ago, 2013 or so, I bought a clone of an XM18. And it got to me, and initially I was like, wow, this is so cool. It feels like an XM18. Within one day, not only did because I was on board. I was in the forums with everybody, and I was like, yeah, clones are, terrible. And I mean, like, I had heard people talk about it, but it had never occurred to me that a clone of an XM18 might exist. And I was like, yeah, copies are terrible. People shouldn't copy people, and I would never do that. And I would only buy U.S. made knives, right? Because I was fairly new to the knife world, and I wanted to sound cool, and U.S. knives seemed to be the thing. So I jumped right in. I was like, me too, right? So anyways, the temptation got to me, and I bought this thing. And for the first half of that day, I was very impressed with it. And then I started to feel guilty for buying a clone, and then I started looking, because then I was like, is this actually the same? And it turns out, no, there were a lot of things that were just wrong. I think a lot of people are fooled by clones, but the truth is nowadays, if somebody put, and not everybody's like this, but I'm so obsessed with Hinderers, and I have bought so many. Somebody tries to sell a clone of an XM, I'll be able to tell immediately. Anybody who's very, very into one particular brand, I mean, it might be difficult for me to tell the difference between a real Sebenza and a clone just by looking at a picture, because I don't know all the generational differences, but I know the generational differences of an XM. I know what the hardware's supposed to look like. I know that the pocket clip screws and the filler tab screws on these Gen 6 XM18s are not Torx or Hex. They're Phillips heads, right? Then you've got a combination of Torx and Hex and a flat head, depending on the model. Right, XM18s will actually use Hex. Some of the new generation, or the Hinderer Eclipse 3-inch actually has Torx. Same with the half track. Right, there's some. It depends on what you're looking at. But I know all that stuff because I can't stop looking at knives. So some people are fooled by this. Some people aren't. The fact that I started to pick out those differences between the clone that I had bought and an actual XM, it made me feel less of a connection with this thing. Initially it was like, I have this thing that could pass as a real XM18, but I only had to pay $65 for it, and I can enjoy it. Well, I stopped, almost all at once, I stopped enjoying it, because I was like, it hit me, like the euphoria of the situation wore off, and I was like, this is a clone, right? It's based on a previous version of the XM, and even then it's not getting things right. And the dimensions were wrong. The blade thickness was wrong. The thickness of the titanium was wrong. The placement and font of Hinderer was actually incorrect. The logos were incorrect or non-existent. And on the blade it said CTS-HP. That's not even a steel. It's CTS XHP is what they were trying to put on there, but they didn't. And you know what? Those are still out there. I looked them up. They're still there. And guys, they're junk. They're not the same thing. Upon further inspection, it had blade play. The blade was off-centered. One of the screws was stripped. Chinese manufacturing has come a long way, and I'm sure there are versions of it out there, clones, that are much better quality. But the truth is here's the foundation of all this. The thing that it took me, I'm embarrassed to admit, it took me too long to realize. The original design is the XM18, and not only that particular model took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and it was somebody's baby, right? Rick Hinderer put his heart and soul into that, and before he developed it, was a knife maker for a very long time with a lot of passion, and went through a lot of prototypes. If you don't believe me, go to the Hinderer website and look at the designs that led up to the XM18. The amount of work that went into developing this knife that took the world by storm, and Hinderer's, what he makes and his fame and the Hinderer name is, he deserves it. The amount of work he put in. So to have some jerk in another country, wherever it is, or anywhere. In this country, another country, doesn't matter who you are, where you came from. You're copying it and selling it, right, and pretending it's not based on, or sometimes not even pretending. I've seen clones that actually put the Hinderer logo on there. In any case, they've stolen the design and they're making money off somebody else's hard work. That's wrong. Yeah, money goes out of the country. Listen, I'm not complete. I used to be completely against any knives that were not made in the United States, and I used to be completely against any manufacturing that wasn't in the United States, right? And some people are still like that. I'm sure there are plenty of arguments for or against, but world economics also affect our economy, right? So it is in some ways, like Chinese manufacturing does. It does harm us, but in other ways it benefits us, and I'm not going to get into that. I don't care. You can leave a big long comment if you want. I probably won't read it, probably won't respond to it. That's not what this is about. But I used to be completely against anything made in China. I'm not against anything that's made in China, and arguments can be made, and I'm sure somebody's going to leave a comment. Arguments can be made that every design is a copy of another design. Yeah, I agree with you, right? Anybody who makes a knife is technically copying the very first guy that sharpened a rock into a blade, okay? So yeah, leaving a comment like that does not make you look smart. Everybody knows that. You're not informing anybody. Taking somebody's design and creating exactly the same thing, like unmistakably the same thing, and either putting their logo directly on it or just conveniently leaving their logo off, right? Either way, I guarantee you they'll still list it as Hinderer knife, right? It's just with a different manufacturer. That's how they get people. And then you buy it, and you're giving that person money, and you're taking money away from the person who created the design. I'm sure there's also somebody who would go, but the Rick Hinderer's made plenty of money, he doesn't, so what if he loses out? That's not the point. That's not the point. It's still, theft of a design, right? And I'm sure we could get really down and dirty with the ethics of this, right? But that's not what I want to talk about. What I want to say is I'll admit, the point of this is I'll admit I bought a clone because I couldn't afford the real thing and I wanted it and I caved. And no matter what, there's going to be a few people out there who will say, no, I'm perfectly happy with my clone and I don't feel bad about buying it. But I'm telling you guys, those of you who are truly lusting after the real thing, whatever it is, right? There's, a lot of you are going to be tempted to buy a clone. And you might be okay with it for a little bit, but there will always be that little voice in the back of your head going, you bought a clone, you took money from the person who created the design, and good and well it's not as good as the real thing, and there are differences between this and the real thing that were not gotten right by the person who copied it, right? Because they were not as passionate about it as the person who designed it, right? They don't care. They're out to make a quick buck. That's it. So this is a very scoldy episode. I'm not trying to come down on anybody. I'm just trying to remind anybody who's teetering on that point. I'm trying to tell you my experience, I come off as this, to a lot of people, I'm sure I come off as this guy who knows a whole bunch and would never do anything stoop so low as to buy a clone, right? Well, no, I'm not perfect. At one point I did do that, but I'm past that point. I'll tell you right now, I have no interest in I would much rather spend 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times the amount of money, right, on a knife. Somebody the other day said, why would you have spent $1,200 on a Praetorian tie? That old episode I did on the Praetorian tie. Why would you have spent over $1,000 on a Praetorian tie? You can buy the clone for $50 or $60. Because it's a clone and it's not the real. And by the way, anybody who doesn't know, the clone of the Praetorian tie is a joke. Oh, it's so garbage. It's nothing like the real thing. Steel frame lock, not titanium, wrong dimensions, wrong shape of blade, right? The wrong pivot hardware, wrong handle hardware, wrong placement of the pocket clip, wrong pocket clip entirely, wrong backspacer, wrong final edge geometry, wrong. It's not the same. It's in a finish that's not even offered by Greg Medford. So you're not, it's like somebody's like, I'm going to go buy a Ferrari, and they buy a Ferrari, and then somebody else rolls up in a Gremlin, an old 70s Gremlin, and they're like, it's the same thing, right? Because it's a car that goes. It is not. One is a Gremlin and one is a Ferrari. It's not the same thing. Whether or not people need the Ferrari is an entirely different argument, but it's not the same thing. And those of you who are, really in this knife world, really into the fine details, you will notice, and it'll make you feel bad for buying a clone, and it should make you feel bad. All right. I'm starting to realize that I'm too invested in this episode because I'm at the 20-minute point to not upload it, but it's gonna be uploaded with all my ranting and raving and it's the second time I'm saying this. I'm not trying to come down on anybody. I don't want people to be like, Complex is preachy, man. No, I'm not. I'm trying to admit that I have faults, and then I'm trying to rake everybody else in on this so that I don't feel as bad. I'm going, you did it too, or you're thinking about it, right? That's what's happening. All right. That was the most revealing episode that I've ever done. I hope you were at the very least entertained by this, because that's, in its base form, that's what this series is. It's meant as entertainment. So if you were entertained by this or you enjoyed this in any way, shape, or form, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like. So check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.